Now, let's get started with two main formulas that you're going to be using when you're working with F9 reports. It's the equals GL and equals NGL function or formulas. We have an example of a formula here and its different segments, and I just want to briefly go over these. Your first segment is always going to be your account number segment, an example of an account number. Second segment of the formula is always going to be your period specifier, example of March. Third segment's going to be your company. Fourth segment's going to be your fiscal year that you want to pull from. Fifth segment, as it applies, if you're pulling budget figures, is going to be for pulling either original or revised budget information. Now, I've added a couple of notes here just to remind us that basically we just use equals GL, which basically stands for general ledger, for debit balance accounts. A good example there would be expense accounts. We would use equals NGL, which stands for negative general ledger, for credit balance accounts. An example of credit balance accounts are revenues. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's start with the basic GL formula. We go equals GL, open parentheses. Now, the first segment is the account number segment. I'm just literally going to type in an account number here. Now, when you literally type into a F9 formula, it wants you to use these quotations, and that's why I've put those quotations in there. Now, we separate the segments with a comma. The second segment is going to be our period specifier. I'm going to type in March. Close quote, close parentheses. Now, notice I'm only using two segments here. Now, that works just fine, and I'll demonstrate that more in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I hit enter. Now we've got a balance here on this account number for 60-3010-10 of $37,987.71. Now I just want to point out in this GL formula that we are just using the two segments, the account number segment, period specifier segment. We're not using the third segment, the company segment, or the fourth segment, the year, or the fifth segment, budget. When we're only using the two segments in the equals GL or NGL formula, it defaults to what is in the F9 setup screen. So we go up to the F9, bring up the F9 drop-down, select Setup, and it defaults to the company we have selected on the setup screen and the fiscal year 2008. Now, for a lot of reporting, just using the two segments works perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with using the equals GL formula and just the two segments. Now, let's go ahead and close out of the setup screen. I'm going to close out here. I'm going to go back into this formula here. And now, we pulled in a balance for just the period of March, but let's say you want year-to-date March. Well, we can type in YTD. You can abbreviate, hit enter, and then there's your year-to-date figure. Now, notice that the balance here is a credit balance. Well, for display purposes, we're going to use the equals NGL formula. Hit enter, and then it basically just changes the sign. This is a revenue account, so it's a credit balance account, and we'll use the equals NGL. Now, I've literally typed into this formula the account number and our period specifier, but what I can do is, see, we've got that same account number right over here. I can reference this cell J22, so I just go into the formula, and I'm going to take out the quotations because I'm going to be referencing a cell now, so I don't need the quotations. Just bring my cursor over, select the cell, pulls up the name of the cell, and I hit enter. And then there's our balance there again. Now, also in this formula, I literally typed in our period specifier year-to-date March. Well, just like referencing the account number, we can reference a cell that has our period specifier in it. I've got this yellow highlighted cell. I'm going to type in March, hit enter. Go into the formula here, and I'm going to take out the quotations and the year-to-date March. Reference our cell D25, hit enter, and then there's our balance for the month of March. And if you want year-to-date March instead of just March, just type in YTD, hit enter, and I calculated this spreadsheet, and then it updated it to the year-to-date March balance. And just for your information, we don't have to spell out March, but let's say we want to update this to say year-to-date April. What I can do here is just put in 4, hit enter, calculate, and then it updates to year-to-date April. Now, there's one other thing I want to point out here, and that is the naming of cells in Excel. Currently, the name of this cell that I clicked on is D25, and we see that right here. We can name a cell in Excel anything we want to name it. And to do that, we just click in the cell up here. I'm going to call this cell period 1. And I hit enter, enter again, and then that way it gets me out of the cell. Now when I click back in here, basically the cell D25 no longer exists. It's been named to period 1. Now what I can do in this formula, basically I take out the D25, select this yellow highlighted cell again, and then it pulls up the named cell period 1 into the formula. Now, why would I want to name a cell? Well, first of all, F9 doesn't care. F9 doesn't care what the name of the cell is that it's referencing. It's really for my benefit, the user's benefit. It just quickly reminds me that naming this cell period 1 pulls it into the formula here. It quickly reminds me that that's the period specifier section of the formula. Period 1 is not the period specifier. Currently, the period specifier is year-to-date April, or year-to-date 4. Now, another benefit to a named cell is you can have an Excel workbook with multiple reports. You may have a period income statement, a year-to-date income statement, a third tab which may be a balance sheet. Well, they can all be updated from March to April to May from this one named cell, and currently in this workbook it would be the named cell period 1. Now with that being said, let me just add that I can only have one cell in this entire Excel workbook named period 1. So it doesn't matter which tab your reports are on, period income statement, year-to-date income statement, so on and so forth. If it's referencing the cell period 1, no matter where that cell is in the Excel workbook, it will find it. And it will update the report from March to April, May, whatever you have in this cell, again, that is currently named period 1. Now, I'm just going to change the period specifier back to March. I'm going to calculate the worksheet, and that concludes our introduction to the equals GL and equals NGL formulas.